So I'm going to actually do a couple of different things here. You do have a presentation deck, and they hit you with the come around for knowledge articles. This is the current environment that I'm working in right now. It is a Helix 20.08, and I'm responsible as the Remedy administrator to manage this organization. All they do is incident and task for the most part, and they still use service request management, one service request management catalog, which is, it works for them. They have the users pick whatever category, and if they can't figure out the category, guess who gets the ticket? Me. Because it goes to, oh, it's a Remedy problem. We're in Remedy, so, but it's like, hey, I need a new computer. Well, that's not a Remedy problem. So I usually get about 3 or 4 of those on a regular basis. This is where I was talking about that it's kind of hard to get them to actually put some things into the system to help them spread the knowledge. Well, guess what? I've been using it to give it to my boss, who's actually supposed to be kind of like training on the Remedy admin side. And it does help them in that aspect. Is that working? I'm going to move you over here. Okay. So it helps him. He uses it. He works on it. He basically is pinpointing everything from what he has to do, because I do it. And if I'm not there, like I'm on vacation supposedly this week, he's actually handling all of that functionality. So with the let's try reconnect. Gonna work? Is that better? No. A little technical difficulty here. Yes, can you hear me now? Okay. So basically, all of these things that you see in the knowledge management application is all KCS type templates. They're all Remedy type knowledge articles. So he gets in and he reads them. And so I'm trying to, which my question in the last session was, how can I convince this customer to utilize knowledge management? And you can see I have 17 articles. I'm slowly building up on it to get them to get convinced. And I have one of these articles that's published to the public because of this one right here. It's a 7 elements of work code. We created a functionality where they can send an RBE or an email through the RBE message process to reassign a ticket. And what they have to do is they have to use a 7-element code that goes in for this to match the support group. And then once it comes in through an email, I strip it out. I look at it in the support group, see who it is, and then I push it to update the ticket that they're looking for. So it's a nice little process, but that's the only article that I've released to the public. The other question I mentioned was about visibility groups. Is anybody using visibility groups in their knowledge management today? So that a lot of people aren't aware of that, to where you're going to have certain groups. So when I worked at the House of Representatives, we had finance that had to have theirs. We had help desk. We had all sorts of different organizations that had their own articles. But the problem was they didn't want it to be exposed to everybody. So I created these visibility groups and put those groups into that designate. So that's an administration functionality. And that's what this is. This whole session is more on the technical aspect of looking at how can you administer the system, as well as how you can actually create KCS articles and so forth. And I did run into some things like when you're copying and pasting into the article, you get a red line that comes across because something was on the HTML coding and they didn't like it. Or if you try to copy 15 images and you paste them in and you only get 3 images that come over, it gets frustrating in that capacity. So then you have to just piecemeal it and so forth. So those are some of the things that's in this presentation itself. So I'm going to jump, instead of doing admin, let's do the user portion of this process. This is my production environment. And when you go in, you may see keywords that I put in here on some of these, like Remedy or how-to functionality. I still use the old how-to references, things like that, inside my title. So all I have to do is just type in a how-to functionality. Okay. Now, do you have a standardized title for your articles? Probably not. You let everybody else put in their articles. You have that.
So that's where you got to have a standardization of that functionality. Now, because I'm running this, I don't use the approval process. We take the defaults and let the approvals go out. If I cancel it, it automatically approves it. If it's published or if it's end of life, it automatically gets approved, because the fact is I'm the only one that's running the show, and my boss doesn't really care. What they don't like, though, is how many of you created an article? When does the clock start that you have to revise it? Remember, you have that 1 year time period. When does it actually start? That 1 year point is when you save it, not when you go to publish. It's when you actually create it. That was a nightmare for me at the House of Representatives, because I imported all of their articles into the system, and then I kept on monitoring. And I'm like, when are you going to advance these? When are you going to advance these? So then they advanced them, but then they had to get approved. When are you going to approve these? By the time they advanced it and approved it, we were already 6 months gone. So I told them, now your articles are only 6 months valid. So now you're going to have to go in and make the change of revising it and running through that whole process. So that's something you need to be aware of. Can you change that date? Can you change it from a year to maybe 2 years? Yes, no? Sure, it's a filter. All you have to do is go find that filter and change it. So if you want that filter, I can tell you what it is, because I've changed it on mine. Because I got tired of it, because these are mine. I know that they're still bad in that aspect. So you can change it. Again, that's the administration side of the house. How many of you actually imported your articles using the data management tool? Anybody? Long time ago? In the older versions of 20.08, two problems that came up. Number one, if I was importing them into how-to or reference or whatever, for some odd reason, the title came blank. And it was a bug in that process. And it still was a problem in 2008 when I did it with the customer, because we imported them in and all my the titles were gone. So we had to go in and manually put them in.
Sorry to interrupt. You're not sharing your live screen. It's the slide deck.
I'm not sharing this.
No.
All right, so stop sharing, share it. Oh yeah, I guess that would help. All right, my apologies for those that are on the Zoom. So basically, when you import, one of the things was the title was gone. So I put in a BMC ticket, and that even happened on a job that we were doing around Christmas time of last. And so they did a troubleshooting on it, and then all of a sudden, our guy from Partner IT figured out what it was. It was just a workflow item that had to be fixed. So he fixed it and sent it to me, where BMC never got back to me and told me what they had to do or what we had to do. The other thing I ran into is I had to be in the group that I was importing them for. If I was not in that group, guess what? It came to my group, and then I got notified that it was time to expiration. So when you are using data management tool, make sure when you import it in, you're logging in with that group that you're going to send it to. Okay, because that way that they get the owner of it in that capacity. Okay, so everybody's created a KCS article before? Yes, no? Okay, so basically I can create one. You just come over here. You have to have the right permission. So I give myself knowledge administrator, because I'm an administrator, I'm managing it. I don't deal with the KCS contributor, the KCS coach. I don't get into those. Because if I did, I lose my KCS or my knowledge administrator rights. Did you know that? If you gave somebody KCS coach and they had knowledge user, guess what happens? They lose knowledge user in that capacity. So they have to do one or the other. Now with this COM around, it sounds like you're just going to have to stick with KCS. You might as well just start using and putting them in at this point in time. So when I go in and click on the knowledge, then you get your templates. So you can hide those templates if you wanted to off of here. That's an administration functionality that's available. And then I'm just going to go ahead and click on KCS template. And what you could do is down at the bottom where it says automatically select this template in the future. If you're ever going to do KCS templates continuously, just check that and you'll never get the screen again. And it'll automatically open up the KCS template. Okay. So now I'm just going to go in here. And now you're going to come up with the KCS format on the left and the remedy format on the right. That hasn't changed from how to reference or anything like that. So you still have your support fields that are in that capacity. So in the article designated that you're going to come in here, if you wanted to say, oh, I didn't mean KCS, I wanted to go to how to or reference, you could click the change and change the template if you wanted. So now when you're going ahead and putting in a request, again, depending on who it is, I may start with remedy, I may start with how to or whatever. So in this case, I will go ahead and say remedy. And then I will say teaching class for come around. Video only. So what I'll do is I'll embed the video that we recorded and place it in here. So they can actually go ahead and open it up and view it. Now, the advantage of that is they get the video. The disadvantage of it is there's no text for them to actually download or anything like that. So now, but the other thing is, it already showed me I have some options that I may have a duplicate article that's in there. If I wanted to look at that, I can do so. Then you just come down here and KCS, the difference with the KCS and then some of the others, well, they have different fields, but it throws in the environment. So you have the problem, you have the resolution, and you have the cause, which are kind of similar to some of the other templates you use, but you don't have the environment. So you can splash on, well, what is this all about? Well, this is about knowledge management. So I can say the environment is knowledge management. I can say BMC Helix. I can say any of that capacity in the environment itself. Okay. And then you just go ahead and fill out the information that's over here on the left-hand side. I'll pull up some examples just to show you here in a minute. Then on the right-hand side, this is where that visibility group comes in. Now, this one, I only have two choices. I have global and I have the company name. But at the House of Representatives, I had 160 different groups because we had 160 different support groups. And then if I have to have 3 groups create or look at it, I can add 3 groups. What if I had to have 50 groups? Then I'd just go and create a new support group, give everybody rights to that as a no notification, don't sign tickets to it. So it's a non-support functionality. And then I would create a visibility group for that and they would be associated with it and they would have it. It's a lot easier to put it in one group visibility than 50 groups added on to the ticket. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and do my company. And now I'm going to go down here. You can publish it to the external. Of course, I don't want to do that. If I do publish it, it becomes DWP accessible. Or if you have SRM side, then of course you have the request console. And I'm already the author. I'm going to assign it to myself, whatever group I want to put it in. Now, this company thing, I don't like to do all because it's basically like a global designator. And sometimes I've run into it where it doesn't really help it. So I'll click on the company, click on it again to get it as primary and get rid of the all. Why? What's the primary? Does anybody know what the primary is? Primary is what's stored in the back end of the ticket on the actual knowledge article. We only have one field for company. Okay. If I add 3 companies, where's the other 2 companies coming into it? It's related to it. It's not on the ticket itself. So if you were to run a report off the RKM knowledge article form, you're only going to see that primary company. Does everybody see that?
Does that help drive the approvals as well?
It could, but that's a different story.
Okay.
So hold that thought. I'll come back to that. The question is, does this drive the approval process? It can, if you wanted to go by company. But what if I have 3 different companies in there? Are you going to get 3 different approvals in that capacity? It's possible. Okay. But I stay away from that on the approvals. And I'll show you here in a minute. Okay. So does everybody understand the company designator? Same thing as Prodcats, same thing as Opcats. When you select it, you can select as many Opcats and Prodcats that you want. This is more for Smart IT to bring it up as a possible article solution for you. But one of them has to be the primary. Why? Because it's got to go on the article ticket because it's one of basically the required fields if you're going to put one in there. Okay. So you designate it as a primary designator. You also have your keywords above here, and the keywords, you separate them by a comma. Okay. So in this case, this is the training. So I would say comma around. Since I do not have a case sensitive system, it doesn't matter if it's uppercase or lowercase. This is remedy, and this is knowledge. And when I hit enter, it adds your keywords in. Now, again, that is stored in the same field with the keyword search, because that's what your search criteria is going to utilize based against the title of or summary of your incident or problem or change. Okay. Any questions on that? All right. So now you can select the site, the categories, and so forth. I want to come back and address your question about the approval process. I basically stick with business service, and if I can't convince the customer to use business service, I convince them to use the product catalog. Now, if you select the business service, it automatically populates the product catalog. If you look at the application or the approval mapping is restricted in what you're available. You have opcats, you have prodcats, you have company designator. I think I brought one up here for the mapping. Let's see. Well, I'll get to it. Yeah, here it is. And let me make it expanded. So if I do knowledge articles, it doesn't like that. But, all right, well, if I did the knowledge article, which news search, I don't think I have one. Let's see. Yes, I know. All right, I'll fix that. But in the criteria down here in the bottom, and I have it on the PowerPoint, it shows you what attributes you can use. And I use the product catalog. So at the House of Representatives, the finance CEO said, I do not want to see anything that's internal. I only want to approve what is going to the public. So as a business service, I titled one as articles released to the public and articles kept internally. So when they selected articles released to the public, at the knowledge article approval level, I did level 1 and level 5. Level 1 was for the group that had to deal with it, and level 5 was for the finance manager. Okay, where if it was internal, it just went to that group that had to approve it, and that would be the finance or help desk or whatever it was that we were involved. There was like 6 different or 7 different organizations that were dealing with. So the business service, each one of those organizations had their own business service, and they each had a reference to whether it's internal or external. That's how I did the business process. Okay, and it made it a lot easier for me to define which of these would go to the manager, the CEO of finance, and which one stayed internally to the group. And that's where the approvals came through. She was happy with it because she didn't have to see all the approvals, because she didn't care about it if it was internal, but she just left it up to the organizations to deal with. Okay, any questions on that? I guarantee you she didn't want to see 300 articles that I imported in for one of the groups, and it's like just stuck at the region. And she would have like, hey, I'm too high up here. Why am I looking at these internals? So that's what I use on is the podcast with the business service designator. All right, so that's when I come over here. I don't have any business services, but I can go ahead and check and select my podcasts. And unfortunately, I only have software. I don't have it listed in here. And then I would go ahead and use it. And you can barely see it. It's in blue, but you can see how it's marked as primary. So if I had another one, a third one, a fourth one, I can pick whichever I want to store on the record, and the other ones to be related. That's where the primary comes in. And the primary is what I primarily use for the approval, because if it's related, it won't pick up on the approval process. Okay. Any questions on setting this up, creating it, and so forth? Okay. Well, on the deck, it'll actually step you through the other processes, because it's kind of weird. It basically gives you a status of in progress. I can't get that. Why is it in progress? Why didn't they just say draft first? You have to put it in draft from in progress. Did you know that? When you create the article, it saved it. Well, what happens is I'm the author of this. I have knowledge user, or I have knowledge contributor, or I have knowledge coach. When I save it, but I'm not assigned to it, somebody else is assigned to it. Once I move it from in progress to draft, I can no longer modify that article, because now it's in the hands of the group that's responsible for it. And that's what they did, was they put it in the hands of these groups within each organization to handle the articles. So anybody could create an article, but only certain people can modify it and then release it to the organization. And that's what I'm trying to get my current customer to do is you pick people that you're going to be managing the articles because that's what you got to have. And I don't think I heard that at the last session. Okay. So any questions on that? Okay. So that kind of gives you an idea on that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I'm going to share again. And I'm going to grab, there it is, my presentation real quickly. Now there is a lot of information that's on here, so I'm just going to go and through some of the blazing speed of this. And I have no problem talking fast anyway. And I'll stop at some of the ones that I want you to have. I'm not going to give you the sales pitch. You already know what knowledge management is. I do want to put the permissions. These are the permissions that are available for when you're dealing with KCS. And again, you cannot have KCS and knowledge user. You cannot have knowledge admin and KCS because I've lost my admin permissions when I did that. So I keep myself as a knowledge administrator, and I can still create KCS templates.
Usually the between the candidate and contributor difference would be.
I think I do that. That's just setting it up. The candidate is basically a knowledge submitter. They can submit an article. Okay, they can work on it until they move it to draft, and then they're done with it. So at the House of Representatives, I basically gave them knowledge submitter permissions to every support person. So anybody in support staff can submit it. So when you're dealing with KCS, as they were talking about in the last session, you want to give them KCS candidate for any support staff. And then you start going into, all right, who's the next one? Who can teach people, which would be KCS coach. Who can publish these articles would be KCS publish. Or in the contributor, who could add in, who understands the audience, who can actually work on it would be assigned to it to actually manage it from the draft point to the content review or proofreading. That's where they go into. But they're basically not allowed to advance it to publish approval. Okay, that's where they have to assign it to a publisher. But basically, what I generally do is I just make those that I only do a KCS candidate and KCS coach. I keep it simple.
So a contributor, that would be like a team suite, like the server admins, if they're working on that kind of article.
The high-end techie, yeah. I mean, because your server manager would be more of your coach.
Okay.
That's how I would approach it, because they're the ones that are going to release it for the most part out to internally or to the public in that aspect. They're going to make the final say so. So they would probably be my approving authority as well at the first level. Okay. So that's how I do that. Now, let me ask you this. What permission do you think I gave the financial CEO? Remember, all she's doing is approval. None. Did I have to give her knowledge approver functional role? Did I have to give her knowledge functional role approval? Remember, in the knowledge management, I'm giving it to the group that she's a group. She's inside a group. So the answer is, if she is in a group, do I have to give her that functional role? The answer is yes. But if I give it to her individually, I don't have to do that because she can approve it, because what happens on the approval process on the AP signature form, it puts her as the submitter, and you should have submitter mode lock set up. So she doesn't need a license, which I didn't give her a license. So I did it individually. I didn't do it as a group. I did it individually. The only catch to that is if she resigned and somebody else took her place, I'd have to make sure I go in and change the mapping.
Does that work if she has an alternate?
Does that work if she has an alternate? The answer is yes. She could still establish an alternate for her knowledge articles. It also works if I'm the full admin permission. Then I can go in and approve it for her as well. So you still have that capability as well. And I did that quite often because I ping her and she was busy and she goes, well, can you approve it for me? Because I've read it, but I just didn't get a chance to do it. So when I approve it, I state the reason why. I got the email, talked to her. I'm covering my butt. Okay. But that's what I would do with any of you that are doing full admin is make sure that you do that. Okay. So this is just showing you how you can put in the permissions. And we talked about the functional role as the knowledge management approver. This is what goes away. Apparently with Pomeron, that's what it's asking about. Decision trees, how to, the knowledge, the known errors and so forth. That was initially confusing. When I did the House of Representatives, they were like, well, how do we know which one to put it in? I said, don't worry, put it in a spreadsheet. I'll figure it out for you. But now I don't have to worry about it. Put it in KCS template. They already have it. Now we have to talk about structure. What is the structure that they're going to put in? Okay. This one, you can look at it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I'm going to be running out of time shortly on this one, but this is showing you where your knowledge sources are incorporated. And in this case, you can see in the RKM, all these templates. So when you create a how-to, it's going into this RKM how-to template form. So when I did this for an organization last year, we set up chat. And chat, which I saw on their chart, chat was very low. Did you see that chart, that green line for chat? On the chart with all the lines, they had the self-service was way up here in the yellow. Well, at the very bottom was chat. It was like very crawling along the line, and then popped up a little and went back down, which probably tells me that nobody's using the knowledge portion in chat when somebody calls up, or maybe they're not using chat at that time. We had a third-party organization set up chat and tap into the knowledge article, and we had to tell them to point to all these RKM forms, so they'd have to search for it. But what they didn't do is deal with the status and the publish rights. So when somebody from an outside source is coming in and asking questions, they're splashing up articles that are internal and in draft mode. And I'm like, that's not right. And they wouldn't listen to me. They kept on, oh, it's working, it's working, it's working. But you don't understand. It's not published. It hasn't been validated. It hasn't been vetted. And they're releasing these articles. So when you're dealing with chat, make sure that they establish to look for what's published. And if it's mainly with chat, you probably want it to go only to what's releasable to the public. Because I really don't want to give them something like, hey, just open up the box on your CPU and check to see if the light's there. Oh, guess what? You just lost your warranty. Oh, yeah. So this is just showing you where you can create those through a data wizard. So that's just changing a new source. If you wanted to add another form, a custom form for a custom template, this is going to walk you through the data wizard. I'm not going to step through it. It's just showing you what you need to do to point to where you're going to store it. And then you can make your own template that's accessible in that aspect. Okay. Visibility groups. You still have to use the knowledge console to get to the visibility group. And on the bottom left-hand corner, you do the manage knowledge or visibility. Well, what you could do, which I haven't figured out how to block it, is create an action on Smart IT and have them go to this. But the problem is everybody can do it. And or if they click on it, oh, you don't have rights. So I don't want to do that because then I get more complaints about why do I have rights. So this is where you go in and you start adding in or selecting what you have. And this is out of the box for the global. And then you can go ahead and create one for each of your support groups. And in this case, I did it for all of the Christ Hospital support groups that we created. So that way, each organization at the hospital can create their own articles. Like on the school district, you could do it for maybe first grade, second grade, third grade. I don't know if you have your group set up for that, but I'm pretty sure not. But you could do it for by grade levels or things like that of what articles they have. Because maybe they want to know, how do I handle a second grader that is obnoxious in class? Well, here's the step-by-step. Get a 10th grade teacher. Okay, the approvals, you only have 3 to deal with. This is published, retired, and canceled. This allows you to go ahead and when you, is anybody not on 20.08? I think you're on what, 20.02? Anybody else older than 20.02? One of the problems I had in Smart IT was we could not cancel an article. At the House of Representatives, they could not cancel an article. Well, what we did was, the only choice we had was content review. Because I wasn't giving them ITSM in the background. I wasn't giving them knowledge articles in the background. So they were asking, how can we handle this? So every day I ran a report based on content review, which meant they wanted to cancel that article. And guess what? I'd go into the Knowledge Console in the back and cancel the article. I had to change it from content review because they weren't using it to cancel. They used proofreading, but they didn't use the content review. But now you can cancel. So it is available in that canceling it functionality. But now on the approvals, when do you want these? Do you want somebody to sign off on these? Usually when it's canceled, I would go ahead and automatically approve it because somebody wanted to get rid of it. Might as well get rid of it. Okay. Maybe they want to start all over. But in the published and retired, you really need to start off with something. So you come over here to the chain. You find the three items that are marked as enabled. And you can find the enables like level all for retired, level all for published. Those are the ones that when they're marked as enabled, that means it's automatic. So what you're going to have to do is turn them off and go to the ones that require some kind of functionality. And this is where you can come in and set up, and it'll show you how you can configure the approval chain if you wanted to alter it from a different qualification. I haven't had to alter it because it's all worked fine. I just had to enable or disable. And enable the one I want as a get an approving authority or automatically approve. Okay. And the mappings, this is where I was trying to show you on the mapping. You have the individual and group, but this is the section I was looking at is you could do the company if you wanted to, but guess what? The company better be the primary. If you do all, guess what? There's no mapping. So the ticket sits there. Because if in this case, if there is no authority, it does not go any further. Now you're stuck in a rut. So that's why I always select the company. And in this case, it's your primary company. Same thing as the podcast, same thing as the opcats. So in this case, I told them we're going to do services, the Christ Hospital. My tier 3 in this case was going to be internal services or internal articles versus external articles. And that was it. We only did 3 tiers. Any questions on that? Now, if they did a business service, they can attach this podcast to it. And then when they select a business service, it automatically added it to the article. And there's your map. And then, of course, here, the levels. So when it's a region or a manager, it's a level 1. When it's a CEO, it's a level 5. I like to do the skipping numbers. So I usually do 1, 5, and 10 when it has to do something like that. You can do that in change management too. I do that a lot in change. Okay. Or you can do it on the implementation stage. You can do level 1. Okay, level 1 is going to go to the cab manager. The cab manager has to document it to make sure everything's done. Okay, so they got a level 1. You approve it because you did everything off the checklist. Level 5, we go to the cab. I release it to the cab. I want them to know before we meet what changes are coming so they can sign off. So I have 5 cab managers that get a notification and each one's going to sign off. When they all sign off, then it goes to level 10. Guess what? Back to the cab manager. What does he got to do? Or she does. They take it to the cab board and they report on it. Has anybody got any issues? Nope. They approved it. They finalize it. It goes to schedule. In this case here, you could do the same thing if you had a meeting of all the articles. But nobody does. Nobody's going to meet on that. You don't have a cab. You're just going to have the levels that need to sign off for it to go public or not public. Any questions on that? Everybody knows about the configuration process, right? Where you can set up where it goes or what happens. Even though it says here for set it to published, I've had issues with that, especially if you said global as the company and it didn't find one. It should have advanced it to published, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't in that aspect. So that's why I always do a company if I'm going to use a company for approval or something in that aspect. So this is basically, the rest of it is more guidelines as far as the different statuses in the articles. You have in progress when it first starts up. When it moves to draft, the knowledge submitter, the knowledge knowledge contributor will no longer, now I got confused on my permissions. Let me go back. Must have been that beer that we had last night when I was walking back. It's her fault. Knowledge, KCS candidate. Had the wrong one. So whenever you move this, when you watch this recording, just, well, I remember that still. When you go to in progress, the KCS candidate can still modify the ticket, because they're still allowed as the submitter to go ahead and modify the request. I don't have to give them a license, but they generally have a license, but KCS submitter doesn't need a knowledge license. Then when they move it to the next stage, which is draft, and that's where it got me confused on those, because I've already drafted it. I want to put it in progress, but it's reversed. That's probably the IT of me thinking. Then it goes to whoever's assigned to the article as the group assigned to it. And then you can do the SME review, subject matter expert. I don't get this optional review 1 and 2. All I know is it's content review. That's the status. I don't know where they came up with this optional review 1 and 2. I haven't seen it. It's not an option when I open it up. So I always use content review. And then the next one is you have to put it to publish approval. So it checks to see if there's any approving authorities. And then if they do approve it, then it goes to published. If they don't approve it, then it goes to whatever your process configuration or reject in that status. Okay? Any questions there? All right, so that's basically a rough overview of knowledge management, and gave you some scenarios that I've run into with the knowledge management. Again, my current customer, I deal with it. My previous one back over the Christmas holidays, I was involved in teaching them how to do the articles, but they took it out of my hands, which was a good thing because they had about 1,000 articles for the Christ Hospital to put in. But they still would come back. What's this? Why is this happening? So they'd ask me a few of those questions. And one of them was the title was blank. And that's when we put in the ticket, and that's when we had to fix it on our side and fix the workflow. I have that somewhere. I can dig it up if you have that issue. If you're importing and it's blank, just let me know and I can tell you which work. I have a lot of documentation. I'm a hoarder of documentation that I've done because I'm a big believer in it. So, any questions on anything in knowledge management?
Do you utilize the activity log at all?
Do I utilize the activity log? Currently, the answer is no, because I'm the only one that's going into it. Who's going to actually see it would be my boss, and he doesn't do it. What he does is he'll email me. He'll say, hey, there's a misspelled word or whatever. He will not use the activity log to trigger anything that tells me it needs my attention, which he should, but no. I don't use the activity log. I don't use the discussion functionality that you could use in the system. I just basically put it out there, but we don't use it. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, so our customer is looking to relate knowledge to specific incidents. Is that going to change much, or is there a capability that you?
Okay, the question is that his customer is wanting to relate the knowledge articles to existing incidences, changes, and problems. That is still there. You can go to the resources tab in Smart IT and do a search, and you can relate as many articles as you want to. Okay, you have the little checkbox. You know what I'm talking about on the resource? Do you use Smart IT, by the way?
We're not using Smart IT.
Well, then what you do is go to the relationship tab and then go and look for on the left-hand side, you have search knowledge. And then when you do that, then you can relate it if you're on the old school ITSL. Okay, so you still have that capability. The self-service, though, is different. Self-service, if you go through the request console of SRM and you pull up an article, you have a button that says report an incident, and it will link the article to the incident. You don't get that in DWP. In DWP, you get, hey, was this helpful for you? Yes or no. So that's how, when I saw the rating or saw what they were doing on one of the charts as far as how many people are using it, I'm like, well, where do you get that number? Is it all these people are saying that this was easy to use or not easy to use? Are they doing the rating? Because I can open up an article. There is no number that tells me who's looked at it. It doesn't trigger, oh, this has been viewed by 15 people that I know of, at least not in the reporting because I've looked at it. So there is not that option that's available. So now you have to look at it from a perspective of self-service. In chat, sure, I know that they're using the article because the chat will
will identify what article they decided was helpful and then create the ticket and relate it to the article. But in DWP, I guess maybe in advance you could do it and say connect the article, but in DWP basic, you don't have that option. So, but on the back end side in Smart IT, you just go to resources, and if you're in the ITSM, go to search knowledge, and then you do the relationship whenever you find your article or articles that you want to describe. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes, no? Well, I'm going to give you 10 extra, or well, maybe 20 extra minutes for your lunch. So now you have almost a 2-hour lunch break. All right. Thank you for your time.